Oh shit.
Oh, we're good.
We're
It
on
is now.
air.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Secular Jihadists from the Middle East. And I'm going to introduce the usual suspects. So we have Yasmin Mohammed, author of the upcoming Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. And she writes at confessionsofanexmuslim.com. Check that out. Hi, Yaz.
Hey there. So my book's actually called From Al Qaeda to Atheism.
Oh, yeah, her book. Okay, yeah,
Wrong at it.
I do. Yeah, it takes me, it's Y
It's okay, I
chromosome.
forgive you.
And then we have Armin Navabi, and everybody knows Armin
Oh.
Navabi. He's the founder of Atheist Republic. He is an Atheist Republic, by the way, in case you've never heard me say this before, is the largest online platform for atheists in the world with over 1.7 million followers. And Armin is also author of Why There Is No God. And yeah, it's a great
I don't
book.
make him do that, by the way.
Good. Huh? We gotta say this is what we say. And I am Ali Rizvi. I am author of um, a book called The Atheist Muslim: A Journey from Religion to Reason, and that's because religion is not reasonable. So you have to choose between one or the other. In any case, so we're here today, and we're going to be talking about: is there an enlightenment that's happening in the Muslim world? There are some of us that are more optimistic about it. There's some of us that are a little pessimistic about it. They don't think it's going to happen. There's some people who think that, you can't change things. That's the way it is. We just have to sort of contain it and live with it the way that it is. And there's other people who think that, no, it can change, just like the other major religious societies in history changed and they modernized. So can it really be modernized? And what is happening in the Muslim world? What's happening in Muslim majority countries? The people that we feature here, the loads of people that we talk about, the polling data that's showing that there is a rise of secular thought and pro-secular individuals and atheists and agnostics in Arab countries. There's a lot of TV shows in the Arab world where people are freaking out about it. There are countries like Saudi Arabia that have called atheism terrorism. They've equated it to it because they're scared of this, as Mariam Namazi says, the tsunami of atheists that are coming out of the closet. So is that really a positive rosy situation, or is it just an illusion that's never going to happen? That's the question. Or is it somewhere in the middle? I'm just babbling right now because you guys are just sitting there quietly and not saying anything. So, Armin?
I was reading.
Okay, Yaz, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, I was just reading the chat here where people are saying that Saudi Arabia is trying to be more normal now. And that's something that we talked about in our podcast. We had a Saudi Arabian guest that we just finished speaking with now, so it should be up soon. His name is Moad. And he talked to us a little bit about what's going on in Saudi Arabia right now from his perspective. And yeah, Saudi Arabia is trying to be more normal. So I guess that is sort of good news, but it's the kind of news that you take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
We're afraid to be too optimistic about it.
Well, it's a little early to say.
By the way, just to be clear, when Ali says enlightenment, this is completely different from the reform thing. Actually, and if you compare it to Christianity, we don't give credit to the Reformation movement for putting Christianity in the weak position that it is now. We give credit to the Enlightenment movement, and the Enlightenment movement is not changing Christianity, but making Christianity compete with better ideas and putting it submission because these other ideas are better than Christianity, and this is what we need to replicate.
Right, and so just for just a quick cliff notes, or I guess the reform for dummies thing in Christianity, the history of Christianity, the Catholics. You had Martin Luther, who sort of pretty much started the Protestant movement, and he came out and he actually started the whole reform movement, and it was a very, very bloody process that some say paved the way for the Enlightenment later, which was a completely different animal. Other people say that it didn't have any relation to it. Is there an analog, like that for Islam and for the Muslim world? There are there people who can make that possible? That's the question. So
Right. S- So, when you're saying is it possible as hopeful, are you talking about in a theoretical way or in a practical way, or the situation right now that it is on the ground, or do you have a specific country in mind? Because when people talk about the what's happening in Islamic countries, it seems like they kind of sometimes it's just like the whole situation there is the same mixed soup right together. Like, but we all understand that like the situation in Iran and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Lebanon,
The thing they
they're
all have in
completely different.
common, the thing they all have in common is the fact that they have not separated mosque and state. So that's one thing that
mhm.
Right,
that they
right.
all
But
need to
I
do.
would, that's true. But how you get there might be different in each one of these countries, right? Like,
That's true. So the thing is, there are some things that do happen in common. Like there is the domino effect. For example, the Arab Spring, which wasn't very successful in the end, but it was a decent first attempt. Is that, you know, it started off in one country and then the effect spilled over into other neighboring countries and pretty much went across the Middle East like a bit of a domino effect. Now you have a situation where there's, you know, we've already seen that there are cracks in the Iranian hardliner establishment. You know, we saw that in 2009, like a lot of those feuds became public. We're kind of seeing that in Saudi Arabia now. We're seeing all these different princes and families, and we're seeing cracks in the royal family in Saudi Arabia as well. Um, we're seeing distorted versions of it. We're seeing a completely power hungry young 30 something year old who also kind of wants to bring in reform and wants to
no,
change
no, that's
things. And
okay. Let's not get into that because I'm gonna fucking this like
there
I'm
is
gonna
the
get
Yemen
mad.
issue. So yeah, there
No,
is the Yemen issue.
it's not. You don't. You can't call something a reform if it's meant to not be a reform. It's meant to be a distraction.
I'm
But
not
I'm not
calling it
gonna get
that.
into.
I'm just saying that that's right now the view that it's something that is very different from the way
Yeah,
that things were before.
but for all the wrong reasons.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, it's not
but
going to be
I want
completely.
to. I just want to point out that you picked the title for today, right? And I'm
Mhm.
really happy with your choice of words because I do. Some people are mentioning Martin Luther in the chat, I think,
Mhm.
and I really we do have to point out that a lot of people that keep pointing as Martin Luther as an example of what should happen, they really don't understand what Martin Luther was trying to do, right? Martin Luther was trying to make people more read the Bible more people take the Bible seriously and be true to Christianity.
Yep.
That would be a terrible idea for people to take to take the Quran more seriously and follow it. That's a horrible recipe. Okay, what we want is the things that Voltaire, we want Voltaire's for Islam. We want to. That's what we want to
That's why it's called
replicate.
the Enlightenment and not
That's what you
reform.
call
We're
the
not talking about
Enlightenment.
reform. We're talking about the Enlightenment. So, and
Right.
one thing that the reason that people say that it paved the way is that one thing Martin Luther did was that initially it was just the church that could interpret the Bible. The average person was not supposed to read the Bible or anything like that. So what the Reform movement in Christianity did was it said, oh no, everybody should be able to read the Bible. Everybody read it for yourselves. And that kind of changed things. And that may have paved the way for some people who read it and they just thought, okay, this is ridiculous. So that's where that argument comes from. I'm paraphrasing it massively. This is a huge part of history that we're just kind of distilling in. But one of the questions for me, and this is my question for you guys, because I am a little bit more optimistic, cautiously and skeptically optimistic about this. Just in the sense, and I've mentioned on this podcast before, less than 30 years ago, we had the Salman Rushdie thing when everything was completely different. Today we have this podcast. Today we have my book. Today we have Salman Rushdie walking around Manhattan with not even close to the kind of security concerns that he had back then. Today we've got loads and loads and loads of Muhammad cartoons online. So we've got the Council of Ex-Muslims in Britain. We have the Muslimish conference happening this year. We've got XMNA doing a university tour. Uh, there are so many things that have just happened, even just in the last few years, that are a huge jump from how things are happening there. We've got atheist groups in Jordan that are open. We've talked to atheists
Well,
in Egypt.
let me shed on all that optimism right now. Okay.
This isn't what I'm saying is actually facts right now. I haven't gotten to the optimism, but those are actually things that are
Right.
demonstrable, objective.
Yeah, but you have a very Western focus right now, right? If you look at things globally, right? A
No, I'm
lot
talking about
of
globally as
countries are.
well. But go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
let me give you
Yeah.
let me okay. So if you look at globally, Malaysia is going back, becoming more Islamic.
Turkey.
Indonesia is becoming more Islamic. Turkey is becoming more Islamic, right? And in some countries, and you talk about the Arab Spring, which, other than Tunisia, I don't know where else has it been successful, but another movement that was a huge movement was the 2009 2010 Green Revolution in Iran, right? And that was crushed, right? That was crushed. And now the only anti-theocracy movement so a lot of people have given up on this whole idea of, democracy, liberal. Like Rouhani came and he's not doing shit. A lot of people say I'm not saying this is true or not. This is what narrative is. Like, oh, Rouhani can't see. He kept on saying, oh, I'm going to bring women into as ministers. And he did not a single woman as minister because apparently Khamenei said no. So they're like, well, what are you then? You're a fucking puppet then, right? Because apparently Khamenei caused all the shit. But now in Iran, you see the only anti-theocracy movement are these racist nationalists, like, and that their chance is like, is worse than anything. Like the anti-Arab and the racism that Iranians have is something that will scare the shit out of the alt-right in the United States. This is how bad it is. Like the people that are anti-government are the people that are saying to fuck the Arabs, and people that are saying all the problems of Iran come from the Arabs, and we are Aryan, we're superior, we don't worship Arabs. And this is the strongest anti-religious movement currently in Iran. That's the alternative right now in Iran. I don't know where give me and other people pointing out Saudi Arabia or reform is coming. Yeah, the reform that is coming in Saudi Arabia is people going to jail on a mass scale, and people getting killed, and more wars happening. The anti-Shiism is increasing in Saudi Arabia, and you have distraction from reforms for the West to just keep them happy while they take care of their enemies that they need to take care of.
So here's the response to that. Okay, so this is one thing. So when we talk about reform and enlightenment, right? That whole thing, there was a period of several hundred years over which the Enlightenment came around. Okay, and one of the reasons that happened, it was also very bloody. It was very bloody. It was really, really bad for the Jews. Apparently, everything is really bad for the Jews. Whenever these kinds of things happen, the Jews actually end up getting screwed. However, the point is, it paved the way for it. That's why we're saying it paved the way for it. So the question is, what's happening right now? All the sort of the regression from in Turkey and in Malaysia and Indonesia that you're talking about, is that a movement or is it a backlash? And I sometimes think that about even the rise of the Trump and the far right in a lot of European countries, in over here, in the U.S. with Trump. Is that a movement or is it a backlash? Is it a matter of people coming out and saying that we need to move forward in this direction of, say, Trumpism or more Islamic theocracy? Or is it a backlash that, oh shit, the world is changing, more atheists are speaking out? Hold on.
Sorry.
We're seeing all this stuff on the internet. So Saudi Arabia has now called atheism terrorism. They never had that before. But now what's happening is they're seeing all these atheists online. They're like, shit, we need to react to this. And now we're going to call it terrorism. Indonesia and Malaysia, they're like, oh, people are becoming more modern. They're becoming more westernized. They're going on the internet. Shit, we got to bring back the whole Islam thing and clamp down our values. So is this a direction? Is it an affliction that the world is going through where it's going back to these sort of fundamentalist ideologies? Or is it just a symptom of a world that is changing that you can't really change, and the people who knew the world the way it was before, they're just trying to hold on to it, they're giving it one last try? Because in Iran and Saudi Arabia, all these places where they're doing all these crackdowns, they're doing it in reaction, right? In Turkey, they're doing it in reaction, but that means that there's something they're reacting to.
Okay. Yeah. But look at, okay. So for example,
reacting to.
All right. Look at it, but Ali, it's not the last it's not the final push before dying. You know what? You know what? An example, Iran, right? Iran was a reaction to the forced secularism of like
The
and
Shah,
forced westernization. But was it the last attempt? It seems like it to be a very successful, everlasting attempt. Like it wasn't like this
not
last
everlasting. It's only
push.
been since 1979. That's in the large frame of things.
They're
Like
only
again, so someone was asking in the chat that
okay. What
300 years it took before the Enlightenment. There was 300-year period. Is it going to be the same? Are we going to have to wait that long? Well, I'll quote Mariam Namazi again. She said that the printing press, what the printing press did to Christianity in the past, is what the internet is doing to some. So it's not going to be that long. I have personally just forget about the polls, forget about everything else, because they show this. But even
Well, I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, yeah, but okay, people say in Iran, young people are less religious than ever, blah blah blah, and all that shit. But I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But Iran is the Iranian government, the religious section of the fundamentalist part of the Iranian government is now more powerful than ever. Okay, they have more access to connection and resources, and they have spread all over the fucking Middle East, and they seem to be controlling it like the puppet master. Like,
how can that not be part of a backlash, though?
So,
Yeah,
both of you guys
yes.
are both saying the truth, but you're just choosing to look at two different sides of the same situation. So I'm with Ali. I prefer to be much more optimistic about this. Let's look at slavery, for example.
Ooh,
right?
Armin, haha. I got that. Sorry.
So, we abolished slavery here in the West hundreds of years ago. And when did Saudi Arabia finally do it? Like in the 60s or something? So eventually it will happen. I don't think it will happen in our lifetimes, but I think that what is happening now is the beginning of I don't want to say the reform of Islam because people get so offended. Like, I'm not talking about like
you're going to trigger me.
Specifically reform, but I mean the castration of Islam. It's not going to be quite as powerful as it is today. The separation of mosque and state. I think even what's happening in Saudi Arabia now with the power going from the first generation to the second generation, and we don't know if this is over. Like, these guys aren't going to just go to prison quietly. There's, who knows what's going to happen. I think the world is changing so much right now. And the fact that we have the internet and that we can connect and that we are speaking up and we are educating each other, I prefer to think of this as a very positive thing. It's the very beginning of this Enlightenment movement. We're not going to see the fruits of our labor, but I am very optimistic that this is going to go into the right direction.
Like, look at it from the perspective. Look at the precedent. Okay, the precedent, going back to the whole Christianity thing. You think in the first 30, 40, 50 years of it, people probably thought that, like, oh my God, this whole thing is just going to the dogs. But it didn't. The overall trend line was always towards progress. And it just happens to be. I mean,
but the fact that the short-term situation, I don't know what the long-term situation is, right? But the fact that right now we're going backwards,
I don't think we're going backwards. I think it is a backlash. They for the longest time, they never even talked about ex-Muslims at all. They never even talked about atheists at all. But now they actually fear it. Now they're concerned about it. Now they talk about it publicly.
Where?
In Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and
shows, like
Pakistan, they're like, get them off of social media. Like, they're nervous.
Yeah. Right. They're actually targeting social media accounts and arresting people on the basis of that.
So you might say that 30 years, the reaction, this reaction, it's a reaction to the Reza Shah. Yeah, I mean, you're like, yeah, it's a short-term thing. But 30 years, you don't know how many people suffered.
It's definitely not the best case scenario, but I think that they are trying.
Died in the 300 years after reform before
I understand. Here's the
They
thing. I'm
don't.
not.
They're not going to want to let go of power easily, Armin. Right? Especially a place like Saudi Arabia. They're not. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars a minute, right? So they're not going to want to give that up. They
Yeah,
don't want to
but
give up their theocracy
but
for a
it,
secular state.
yeah, I mean, they're going against the religious extremists, right? And they have to be very. I mean, they say that's what they're doing, right? But they're just doing a power play. But remember, who did the same? Who the people that did the same thing were the Pahlavis,
Mhm.
who won at the end.
I don't know who are the
The
Pahlavis.
Pahlavis are with the Iranian royal family. Okay, so
Oh,
we're focusing on Iran. So Iran, or Armin, you're talking about the whole
Well,
Iranian
that's what I
situation,
know.
right? Yeah, no,
So
no, I know. So the Iranian situation, the only parallel it has is that you see what the longer process is. Okay, the longer process is that whenever you had in the Arab world, the association people have with secularism is force and dictatorship.
mhm.
So you had the Ottoman Empire as the last huge Islamic caliphate, source of pride. Who put the nail in the coffin of that? Kemal Ataturk. And how did he do it? He didn't do it through democratic reform. He
he
basically came
didn't
in. He
put the nail in it. He actually created the reaction that we see today.
right, but he
He
did when
forced
he
secularism is not the answer.
no. What he did was when he started it out, when he
Right.
started the whole thing over there, right?
Right.
He forced it. He forced secularism on the people of Turkey. He changed the language of the adhan, right? The prayer call. He changed the
The
script
writing,
that was
yeah.
from like right to left Arabic script to left to right. So he changed everything.
Yep.
And all of the other Arab
But
dictators,
technically, he
right?
changed nothing because he didn't change the people.
They were secular. No. He didn't. He did change the people. The way that
N-
Turkey was a little while ago, until very recently,
It was very secular.
yeah, even now, like the people in
And
Turkey, right?
right.
There are many of them who are supporting the Islamists, and they're getting on that whole bandwagon. But until the last like few years, they've had gay pride parades. They've had
But
all kinds of things.
people like Ataturk and Reza Shah are the people that are responsible for the bad taste that people have with secularism, right?
Yeah.
I think what Ali was saying was that the people were not ready to have the bottom up grassroots movement. So they're only used to dictatorships after dictatorships. So what Kemal Ataturk did was not obviously ideal. We would prefer the people to be enlightened, but he was just following the same strategy that he knew that these group of people were just used to having dictators telling them what to do and they were used to listening. So he forced a different
Mhm.
kind of
I, under,
dictatorship over them.
But what
I understand
happens,
that, but
Armin?
but
Sorry,
so
just
did Reza.
just the last thing. Let me just finish what I was saying. So what happens is the reaction to this. The only kinds of people who are organized enough for a reaction to these secular dictators who rule with an iron fist are the Islamists, because
Mhm.
they're not scared of death. They're fine with the jihad thing, so they are able to organize. You have all these other groups, like you have the socialists, you have the feminists, you have everybody organizing, but they're sort of fragmented. But the Islamists have this sort of passion. So whenever one of these secular dictatorships collapses,
They're
the
right there.
vacuum is filled by the only organized part. In Egypt, it was a Muslim Brotherhood. In Syria,
It's
you're
not that
seeing
it just.
all of those
Yeah.
Islamist groups came. So in Iran, that happened in 1979. You know that Khomeini wasn't the Islamists were not the only
Yeah,
part of the
but
revolution.
it wouldn't have happened without their help.
No, it did happen with their help, but ultimately what rose to the top and fucked up that country for the next couple of decades was the
Yeah,
Shia theocracy.
but
But
we,
and
we
now
wouldn't
it's
have an
cracking
Islamic
though.
theocracy if you didn't have the forced Western modernization upon the people as well. That was the reaction. Like
Yeah.
the Reza Shah and Muhammad Reza Shah and for their forced secularism is responsible for the religious theocracy that we have right now in Iran.
Yeah, no, it brought it about though. I mean, but they're still two different animals, right? Like
Yeah, I know.
look, the thing is that whenever you have somebody going out and doing a power grab like Mohammed bin Salman is doing in Saudi Arabia, right? And it's a very confused power grab. So he wants to go and he wants to take over all of the most powerful agencies in Saudi Arabia. He wants to take it all under his wing. Yet at the same time, he's trying to do this reform thing. That's an act of desperation. When you're saying that the Iranian hardliners are more powerful than they've ever been before, you gather your resources and you try to grab onto what you have when you're in a position of desperation. When you know that the uprising against
Position desperation. This okay. If you look at what's in
after
the Middle East right
2009,
now,
there is a position of
I,
they know that they have to. They're on guard. They know that there are people who can fuck with them. That's
who?
how it happened. Historically, that's always
Their
happened.
own
Every
people. That's why they've
Yeah,
started to give
okay.
them little freedoms and
they
try to
And
crushed
it,
the
appease
guess what?
them.
And
they
they
crushed the
buy it, and
movement
the
in
people.
2009. They didn't crush the sentiment, right? The
Yeah,
sentiment is probably even more
but people
pronounced
have
now.
people have given up on any form of revolution right now. They scared the bejesus out of people. You have no idea how
No,
effectively
we
they
do,
crush
but
them.
that's what we're talking about
That's
right now is
why.
we're saying that this enlightenment that's happening right now is giving people strength. The
Right.
people
Yeah,
were battered
yeah.
down, but now they're feeling like, you know what, with the internet, we can all connect with each other and there are
And,
like-minded people. I'm not all alone. I'm not crazy.
and
And they
I'm
can support each
Yeah.
other.
You know
and
who
I'm
else is crushing
reading and
stuff?
I'm
Is
reading what
Syria.
they're saying on the internet. The
Assad
hope the
was
Iranian people have against this current regime right now, it's not enlightenment. It's
Of
it's
course it's
it's
not.
it's not is the superiority of the Aryan race over Arabs. That's the hope that
Listen, that is one
that's the biggest
element of it.
movement right now.
No,
It's
that's
the
That
biggest.
is an element. That's fine. That's truth for Iran, and I think India is doing something similar with that too. Like they're trying to get Muslim Indian people to feel more proud of their country and um, to disregard aspects of Islam that are Arab. Which I'm like, good luck with that. The whole
no,
fucking
separated.
just get rid of the whole
Hey, that's what Ataturk
religion,
did. He just
please,
separated.
because yeah,
Yeah, he
you
separated
can't.
Arabism from. But I really think that historically, whenever you've seen these kinds of power grabs and crushing, look at Assad. I mean, Assad was just kind of sitting there chilling. He's an ophthalmologist. He had like a British wife who's just, everybody was fine with him. He's just like a docile, regular kind of guy. But now he's desperate. I mean, it's like he's a terrible dictator. Some would say he's the most powerful he's ever been. He's crushing the dissent, but that's not a phenomenon. That's a symptom. It's a symptom. I mean, you had, even if you look at the parallels over here, like the far right and Trump getting elected just on a bare margin, losing the popular vote, but still, getting all this power, right? You had years and years. You had the civil rights movement. Everyone's like, it's still okay. It's still a white country. It's still whatever. And then you have a president named Hussein, like the middle name Hussein. He shows up, gets reelected, comes back, and then there are people that are like, oh fuck, something's happening over here, and you mobilize, and there is a backlash to that. Of course, there's going to be a backlash when you
But
have
Ali, you make
such
it
a huge
seem like
change.
this is like there's a formula that all these countries follow, right?
There is though. There
I
is. I
don't
mean,
think
this
it's
is
that
a.
simple. I don't think there's so many factors involved in all these politics that I
Oh,
think there's a
that's true
very
too.
easy trend that all of them go through. I think it's different. I mean, history does repeat itself, but not in such a
But
not in
it
such a
doesn't.
formula in
I'm
such
saying
an
that.
exact way.
Mark
I.
Twain says history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that.
but yeah.
I'm
So
not a
if it
fan
run,
of that whole history repeats itself thing. I think that a
yeah,
lot
but
of
you
things
seem to suggest
now
that. Oh, look, this is how this is. You seem to suggest that here's a formula that every that this natural thing that countries go through. This happens, and there's desperation, then there's a reaction, and then there's alignment. I don't think that
but
there's
there is
that easy to
Armin,
predict
in,
everything like
if you
that.
in political science, there's a book called the J curve, and I think I may have mentioned it before, where it talks about the letter J and how countries, when they go down to the bottom part of the J and then they start coming back up, and what all the factors are. And there are multiple factors. It's a very, very complicated system. But forget about formulas. Instead of thinking about it as formulas, look at it as patterns. Okay, you look at historical precedents, you look at analogous situations. Obviously, no situations are exactly the same. And then you look at what the commonalities are. And once you have these patterns, you can predict how masses of people are going to behave when it comes to politics, when it comes to sociology, because there's a lot of stuff that's much more common when it comes to oppression and dissent and radical ideologies, demagoguery and populism,
And
than
human
there
nature
is
is still
that's
the
different.
same.
Huh?
And human nature is still the same.
That's exactly what it is. So, again, I'm not saying that we need to be completely, like I said, very skeptically and cautiously optimistic, but to say that nothing has changed in even the last 30 years, or at least we're not in the
I'm not saying
beginnings of
nothing has
something
changed. Things
different.
has changes so much. Things
So are
have
you
changed.
feeling positive too, Armin?
I'm not really. I mean, I
But
mean,
you're
I do.
recognizing that there's been a lot of positive change.
Yes, and a lot of positive and a lot of negative change.
Of course there's negative. I'm acknowledging that, but I'm just saying that the light that I'm putting the negative change in is that
Right.
it's more a backlash than a movement. That's all.
I don't know if I don't know. I mean, I hope so, but I just don't see right now. I feel like Iran is one of the greatest threats to. I mean, I don't see Saudi Arabia as much of a threat as I used to see. I see Iran as a greater threat, and it seems like they're very comfortable. And I think like I don't see a major opposition to their creeping power in all over the region. They seem I don't know, they seem to know what they're doing. They seem to have plans for fucking everything years ahead of their time. They like the Kurdistan people started attacking, and they like their armies were spreading. They just sent Soleimani in one flight. He just flew there, and he stopped half of the army. Decided like they had their connection. It only took him one flight to send him there, and then half of the entire army of the Kurds just retreated. Like these people know the fuck they're doing. Like they had plans. Like they knew that ISIS is going to fall, and they have plans for what they have a Kurdistan plan for what happens after ISIS fall. United States, the superpower in our world, had no fucking plan for what to do when ISIS
No, but
falls, and Iran seems to
that's
be
still
10 steps ahead of everybody else in the region.
that's
I mean,
still very
and the
it's
worst of all
granular
of
and
them.
short term though. Like what you're talking about is very granular.
What?
So there's
What?
headlines that you see every day in the paper, but there's trend lines of
I but I'm
patterns that you see over time, right?
But
And
what I'm saying is why isn't the rest of the why does it seem like the Iran had a plan for what after ISIS, and the United States didn't, and worst of all of them, this fucking Saudi guy seems to make decisions. This Ben Salman guy, he's like wakes up and makes a decision and then watch what was the reaction. Like they don't like they're like, oh, we're gonna go in Yemen. It's gonna be a 3 months war and we're gonna defeat everybody. And now they're fucking 2 years in it and they still like they're stuck in it. And they're like, oh, the Lebanese president, he had a meeting with the Iranians. Oh, let's remove him and there's gonna be a rebellion in Lebanon. The Sunnis are gonna rebel against the Shias. And like all of a sudden now that for the first time in history, the Sunnis and Shias in Lebanon are united and they're supporting Hezbollah. Like they think like they just like shoot by the hip, and they're like, holy shit, it got worse. Like
it
they
is
don't
it's very messy. I mean, if you've seen Faisal's that whole graphic that he talks about, where who's supporting who, and
it's
that
yeah, it's messy, but
it
the
is
Iranian seems to have figured it out.
right. But
It seems like it. Like I'm not saying it's true, but it seems like they're ahead of everybody in this fucking game.
listen, you're going to see this. You're going to see different parties come up. You're going to see different policies come. It's going to come and go. You're going to have a whole bunch of
See,
an
we keep
uprising of
talking
women.
about
You're going to have
enlightenment,
that
but
crush.
when we talk about enlightenment, we have to be able to, this ex-Muslim thing is the only hope I think we have, right? The reform
That
movement
is
is
the
absolute
enlightenment.
fucking bullshit, right? We are like this is that you guys, you Ali, you Yas, you are the enlightenment, right? This is it. You are the movement, right? And the other ex-Muslim movements like XMNA, the Council of Ex-Muslim, this is it. And I think and we are people, if we are fighting the beast that is Islam, and we can't just fight the beast that is Islam in the United States. I mean, because people in Iran and people in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they have given up on liberalism, and like they because we are supposed to be their voice, right? So we really need to
Oh, I
start
wouldn't say
listening
they've
to
given
them.
up.
What?
I
Well, I mean, not all of them, obviously, but I think that what I'm noticing is that they given up on most of the help that they were expecting from any kind of
from the West,
liberal,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
from
You're
the
right.
West, right? But
They
the
are. They're
thing is that
totally deflated.
yeah,
Mhm.
we need to, but who else? Like we have free speech here, and they don't. We need to give them our platforms, right? And this is what Yas does. I don't know how she does it. She goes and finds the best guests, and she comes and they come give them advice. We need to do that more, and we need to try to figure out what's happening there and how we can help. Like, we need to find the activists on the ground there, and we need to bring this.
That's the thing. The activists on the ground there don't want anything to do with us because they think that we're a bunch of mamby-pambies over here.
Well,
Right.
that's also a problem. I mean, there are people who will never, there are people over there who also resist people like us because they're like, well, you're not on the ground over here, you don't know what the situation is, and then they also don't understand the way things are going on here, right?
Mhm.
Like there's some people who
If
are.
I'm not, if I'm mamby pamby because I don't want to burn imams, I'm gonna stay mamby pamby.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Well,
not.
that's kind of they don't have that kind of history. Like, I have heard people, and I remember Omar talked about this on our podcast, but I've heard other people say it too over there that democracy is bullshit. It doesn't work. These people are not capable of handling democracy. But the problem is, like, when you have, that's not something that's going to resonate with people over here, because these countries here have a history of you know really, really strong struggles for democracy, for diversity, for equality, for free speech. All these things really, really matter here. So whenever those things are threatened, then people, Islamic terrorism and all that stuff that the people in the Middle East care about, they become second tier to people who are living in the West, right? Because they have their own internal things. So you have to look at it in the context of the history of the people that you're trying to get support from as
The
well.
biggest joke in all of this was when Ben Salman said we're gonna take Saudi Arabia to back when it was moderate.
I
I was
know.
like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're like, when are you? Like, your
Yeah.
whole kingdom was a marriage between the House of Saud and House of Wahhab. Like,
Hmm.
the whole Wahhabi thing was half of your fucking country from the very beginning. That's how you started.
You, you know what it is? They hear legends. Like this guy, he's 32. So all he's ever seen in his entire life is these fucking dictatorships or super hardliners. I mean, he's 32. So he's 10 years younger than I am. Okay. When I grew up there,
And
I
he's
hadn't
against
seen
the
anything else.
fucking
He hasn't seen anything else.
geniuses in Iran. That's this fucking
You know,
kid is wants to tackle against, wants to defeat the Iranian regime that has been figuring out all the geopolitical details within the area, and he thinks like, oh, I'm just going to go do this and defeat the Iranians. Yeah, good luck with
okay,
that,
so
little kid.
so here's something, and this is actually shown. There's a polling aspect to this too. But do you know what percentage of the population is under the age of 30 in not only in one of these countries, but in Iran and in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt?
Hmm.
Say that again.
What percentage of the population is under 30? 70%,
Yeah, right.
plus minus, of the population is under 30. In those populations, these are people who grew up with the internet. They don't know anything else but dictatorships. They saw a little bit of the Arab Spring. They saw it fail. In other places they saw, okay, our people in Tunisia are doing certain things. They grew up in the Obama era. It's really
Right.
like this entire generation, and also they also are economically disenfranchised, and these are Muslim people in Muslim majority countries. This is the youth. This guy is from that generation. He's 32 years old. Okay, so he's coming up. He's probably been told all these stories when he was growing up about how it was because I remember people used to do that, and he thinks that it's true, and he's built up this idealism in his head. But at the same time, he's also super, super power hungry, and nobody can really read him properly. And the most amazing thing about
He
this whole
doesn't
Saudi
have
thing,
any fucking clue what he's doing. He's a
of course,
fucking idiot.
well, he's also a kid. I mean, he's 32 years old. He's
Right. That's why.
no
That's why I
offense to all
think
the
he might
32
end
year
up
olds.
in jail very
But
soon. I think he's this. He might get fucked over by the other powerful billionaires in Saudi. I'm
my
not saying it will
problem
happen,
is,
but
I don't know. I don't know how to. The only thing that's been amazing to me about what's happening is that they've had. Everybody knows there's been issues in the Saudi royal family. Everybody knows there's like different families of like different kings and sons of Saud and princes and stuff who've been just fighting with each other. But whenever they had this stuff, they used to keep it private. They used to have issues. They say it's not the first time that someone has like jailed somebody from another family. I mean, there are four. One of the girls my sister went to school with is their name is Jawahar. She's a daughter of Prince Abdullah, one of his Jordanian wives. She's been in house arrest for the last 5 years. They did an interview with RT in 2013. Nobody's heard from them since then, right? So these are all people in the royal family, but it all got buried they never aired it out. Now what's happening is what this guy did when he arrested all these, he did it so publicly. And so
Yeah.
it was in headlines right when it happened. That's something that's really unprecedented. So that's why I'm confused, and I can't really read
Here's
why
what I'm
he's doing
worried
it.
about. Okay, here's what I'm worried about, right? What I'm worried about is, the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, they're still pretty powerful, right? And this guy is fucking over any influence that they used to have. If you keep talking about backlashes, if we see a similar backlash like we saw in Iran, Saudi Arabia could be used to be 50% Wahhabi, 50% Saud. If this guy is not successful, and you might see an Iranian revolution repeat itself in Saudi Arabia, right? And then if the
I think
Wahhab takes a, it's yeah, but you say, well, it's not gonna happen. The people in Iran never thought they're gonna see an Islamic theocracy take over like it did in Iran
the
either.
Saudi royal family was already very Islamic. So the backlash that you're going
No,
to
they're
get,
not. It's Saudi royal family. They don't give a shit about Islam.
not behind the scenes, but overtly, the way that they rule, it's essentially an Islamic. It's like the Taliban with a lot of money.
They fucking hate they wish that
Armin,
they
we're
were in
not
a
talking
theocracy.
about like going into their private
Yeah.
parties. We're talking about the way they
Right.
rule over their people. Okay.
Right,
So
right,
if
right.
there
But
is a
only because they have to. They wish they didn't have to.
Sure, but if there is a backlash
Right.
against it, right? The backlash in Iran was a religious backlash against a very, very super secular like guy,
Which is this
westernized,
which is
US
this Ben
supported.
Salman guy right
Like,
now.
okay, well, US supported is the wrong word for Saudi Arabia right now, but
Right.
the very, very westernized
Exactly.
guy.
What exactly US support is the key thing here. Saudis hate the royal family because they're in bed with the US.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of Saudis.
So there's it's really hard to read and it's hard to tell what's going to happen. But
Right.
what we do know,
Okay, but let's get Yes in this conversation. Yes. How do we reach out to ex-Muslims or people that want revolution, people that want change, and they're like people are like, oh, you guys are too soft, you don't understand the situation here on the ground, and you guys are just now you have these Western values, and you're not listening to us, and you're not paying attention. We're dying here, and you guys are talking about fucking freedom of speech and all that shit. What do we do?
I empathize with where they're coming from. I get that. I mean, I said this before when I first left Islam. Like Ali mentioned, it's really hard to separate Islam from Arabs or Arabs from Islam. The culture and the religion are so intermingled that I wanted absolutely nothing to do, because I hated Islam so much. I wanted nothing to do with Arabs either, to the point that I wouldn't even eat hummus. I wouldn't even go to Greek restaurants because I'm like,
Oh my god.
I didn't even want food that
now you
reminded me
crave
of
kibbeh.
Arabic food. Nope, hated it all. I mean, I love kibbeh, but I hated it, hated all of it. Never wanted to make Arabic food, never taught my kids to speak Arabic, never just, I had like a visceral, just disgusted reaction to that whole entire part of the world, culture, language, everything. So I get the anger. I understand the anger. When it is clear and present danger, the anger is, it's pronounced. It's happening all the time. It's constant. Like I said, you feel the coldness of the gun on the back of your neck. But I am privileged now, and I am able to I'm not in that clear and present danger anymore. I'm in a more comfortable position, and I can think a lot more rationally. And
And you're exposed to different people now who've had different experiences as well, right? So
yeah, that's true. But I am not going to apologize for where I am, because for me, this is progress. And where I was before was a very unhealthy place. And I'm glad I'm over it. So people that are basically in that spot right now are looking at me and saying, yeah, you've lost your anger, or you don't understand us. No, I do understand you, but I just don't think that kind of anger is productive. We're not going to get anywhere by just, like you said before, Armin, like by treating each other the way we're complaining about the way people treat us, right?
Right.
So
Well,
I don't know I don't know what the answer is. I empathize with their perspective,
right.
but I'm not going to change who
Well,
I am and what I'm
it's
doing.
okay to. I mean, I'm still angry. I mean, I'm sure you're still angry, but I just don't want that conclusion of that anger to be replacing religion with something just as harmful. That's all I'm
Mhm.
saying, right? And people are saying like nothing could
No,
be
I
just
agree
as,
with you on that, 100%.
but nothing. People say nothing could be just as harmful, but I could tell you that the racism and nationalism and people thinking that if you deserve to die just because you're religious, that is as just as harmful as, I mean, and people say, well, no, we're not saying that, but but I know it's being taken there. At least I'm maybe I don't understand Egypt, maybe I don't understand Iraq, but at least when I look at Iran, I know that there, right? So I mean, this a lot of people think this kind of reaction is justified, but I could tell you that if you take that conclusion and keep going with it, it will take you to a place as dark as religion,
So
as dark
there's
as jihadism.
sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No, I was going to say that's true. You're correct, but we can say that because we're not in the same position that they're in. So there was this picture of these Kurdish or Iraqi soldiers, and they had captured some ISIS militants, and the guys were covered in makeup and trying to pretend that they were women, right? And they're making fun of these guys, and they're putting them in all these humiliating positions. And people from the West started commenting on these pictures about how disgusting that is, and that's so horrible, and these guys are still human, and I can't believe you're doing that. And I looked at the pictures and I didn't say anything because I understand that if you are Iraqi or if you are Kurdish and you are fighting for your life, and these people probably killed your family members or your friends or your neighbors or whatever. So when we're here so far removed from the emotion of that, it's easy for us to look at it from a humanitarian perspective, from an objective perspective. But for people over there, they're in a different situation right now.
Well, if
Yeah.
it's something that's that acute, it makes sense. But like one thing that Armin, the story that he told, I remember a similar story many years ago. I had an uncle who said that the mullahs in Pakistan, like these religious, self-proclaimed religious Islamic scholars, it's like, we should just take them, hang them upside down, and shoot them in public. So that's
Yeah,
what he said.
like that's
And he was like very pro-secular. So, and I remember having this discussion. I'm like, the problem is this is actually evidence that you're desensitized to that.
mhm.
We've become desensitized that we think it's okay to just like shoot people, and that's
Because that was our
again,
response when we were Muslims. That's what we were taught to do. So
that's what we're taught to do. So this is actually that response and that conditioning
mhm,
just manifesting itself on
in
the
a
other
different
side
direction.
of the political or the religious
100%.
spectrum, and that the what we want to fight, what we want to go against, as to Armin's point, is that desensitization. We want to be able to be sensitized to it. We want to be able to say, okay, like, and this was one of the ways that when they killed Gaddafi, and
Mhm.
so I completely agree with the emotional part when you have him in your hands and you're right there and this guy killed your family, then yeah, I get that completely. But when you're not in that kind of acute situation, right, and you're trying to change things, and then you got to think with cooler heads. You have to think about what kind of change you want to make. And another thing about anger, I think anger is a great starting point. It's a great way to sort of kindle and ignite the fire. But ultimately, it has to go beyond that. And it
Yeah.
reminds me, there's an analogy with like when Obama was running for president, he had a pastor, or there was Jeremiah Wright. Are you familiar with it? Jeremiah Wright was his pastor, and he used to say all this crazy shit. Like he was into sort of black liberation theology, and he used to talk about how America is all the KKK, and Whitey is the evil man, and all this stuff. And he used to do all these lectures, and this is the guy whose church Obama used to go to. So everybody started saying
Oh
this,
yeah.
and like,
Mhm.
who is this guy? And then Obama had to come out and do a major speech
Mhm.
during his campaign where he disavowed him. And this is a guy who actually conducted his marriage
Hmm.
to Michelle Obama. So, he had to publicly disavow this guy because of all of the anger and anti-white stuff and the Nation of Islam type stuff that he was saying. And it just reminded me, I was like, at one point that was important at the time of Malcolm X. Yeah, militant, that stuff had a place. But now this guy's basically on a battlefield with a gun ready to shoot, and everybody's already left. They've
Yeah.
moved to a different plane of conversation. There's a whole
But,
generation of
but then
people
people in the
raised.
Middle East were saying you left. We're still in the same fucking situation.
Yeah, yeah, they are. There's many people in the Middle East who are still angry. There's many people like Yaz
No,
is saying.
they're not just angry. They're actually in that situation. They're still in that fuck. Yeah, they're still living that situation.
Right, but I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the acute
Right.
situation. I'm talking about actually moving on to the next step. So
Because
Yeah, but
that's how you can become productive. You're not going to become productive if you stay in the first step.
yeah, because we can vent. There's this thing, like, this happens in relationships. Sometimes, you're trying to tell somebody, like, this is what happened. The other person starts offering solutions, and you're like, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen to me.
no, but just to be clear, we're not saying that
But
if
eventually you have to get the solutions.
yeah,
Eventually you do.
but to be clear, we're not saying that if the fucking jihadis are coming at you to go start talking
Of
about the exchange
course
of
not.
ideas, right?
No.
Like, oh,
Yeah. No,
they're
no,
coming
that's
in to
not.
rape. They're coming to rape our wives and children. Like,
No,
oh,
no,
let's go
Armin,
talk to them. Have you
that's not.
considered that there might not be a god there? Like,
No.
no, shoot the
Of course not.
motherfuckers.
Yes, obviously.
Of course not. That's
Yeah.
not what we're talking about. We had this. I remember we used to have this conversation. I came to Canada once to visit in, I think, 95 or something. And one of my dad's friends, who was a very, very liberal, atheist, secular guy, lived in Vancouver actually, and he had 3 kids. And they all were
Right.
wearing, like, they had long beards. The girl was in the kabi. And then my dad was like, "What the fuck happened to your kids?" And he's like, "Oh, they just got really religious." And I was sitting down, and then we were there for lunch, and I was talking to one of them, and he was asking me about
Exactly.
Pakistan, how he was idealized that he was talking about how democracy is failing, and total Taliban type guy. And then he's like, "Yeah, the problem is over there. People don't think about faith. There's so much corruption, and the police take bribes." And then I told him, I was like, "Listen, if a policeman's getting paid about like $20 a month, like, he's got to support his wife. He's got to support like maybe 7 kids. He's got to support his wife's parents and like all of this shit. So if a spoiled rich kid is speeding and he asks him for a bribe and he gives him 500 rupees, he's gonna take that shit. It's not a matter of morality. It's a matter of survival. He's not gonna sit there and think about, okay, well, what about the existential questions in life? I mean, that's not what's on their mind. So I totally get that. That's stuff that you have to consider as
Yeah.
well. So
Somebody's asking in the live chat what we think about Sufism.
Sufism is
Is that a good reform? Like, I think a lot of people, when they talk about changing Islam, they all sometimes offer Sufism as like, oh, look, here's an Islam that we can.
Well, a
Why-
lot of the reformers actually were Sufi Muslims or are Sufi Muslims, but that's basically what Sufism is. It's a kinder, gentler Islam.
It's like the
I mean,
Kabbalah of Judaism, right? Like, so you're never going to get like the people in Judaism who there's very, very few, the actual, like, ultra conservative, Orthodox and ultra Orthodox and Hasidic type people. Those are the people that you want to modernize. They're never going to buy Kabbalah. It's the same, and it's the same way that we're never going to, like, the people who are truly problematic in the Muslim world are never going to buy Sufism.
But let's just be clear: Sufi Islam is just fucking bullshit. Okay, it doesn't matter
It
that
all is. All flavors
of it's bullshit.
bullshit.
and it's not just bullshit. It's actually people are like, well, it's bullshit, but it doesn't harm anybody. It is harming people, right? Because just like other form of Muslims, most Sufi Muslims actually don't know much about Sufi Islam. But if you're actually serious about Sufi Islam, the whole point of Sufism and mysticism is in general is to replace love for your fellow human beings with a love for God, right? How could anything be so is basically humanistic values. Basically, you're supposed to replace the love for anything in this world, the only world that we know to exist, with this obsession over this imaginary entity. It's a sacrifice of everything that about this world and a sacrifice of your own fucking identity. That's a very sad ideology.
Drugs and the
I mean,
music are incredible for the
yeah.
Sufis.
Well, yeah, okay, I could agree with that. But another thing is that a lot of people have to understand that Sufism is responsible for anything that was even close to enlightenment movements in the Islamic world. It was
It is,
as yeah, I
Sufi
mean, we were
poets.
having an enlightenment movement until Sufism and Ghazali specifically decided that philosophy and knowledge is all bullshit, and intellectualism is like going away from the path. And this, this was Sufism was the anti-intellectual movement that stopped the first chance of an enlightenment movement in the Islamic world.
So you do think that it can happen like it did before,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
as long as Sufism doesn't come to stop it.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. So it's it's one of those questions. Like, this is what the debates that you have, Armin, is that, if you have people, if you can get a whole bunch of people to accept Sufism because they don't want to take their foot completely out, they don't want to leave the faith.
No, I mean, those are the Sufis by name that just heard like, oh, Sufism seems cool, so I want to be Muslim but still be but not be this other Muslim. I'm just gonna call myself Sufis. But those are not real Sufis. Like, actual Sufism is actually fucking dangerous. Maybe not to others, but to yourself. Like, you still have a victim here. Like,
It's
if
your
somebody,
classic self-sacrifice.
yeah, it's full sacrifice of
But it's
anything that is lovely
I
in
guess
this
people
world.
are picking their poison at this point. It's like, what's the lesser of the two evils? So Islam is pretty dangerous right now. So if you want to be a Sufi and not hurt anyone but yourself, have at it.
Yeah, but the thing is that the lesser of the two evil is a good option if you don't have a third option, which is not evil at all.
Of course, we're not going to try and
my God,
encourage people to.
That's not
become
even. That's like a
Sufis.
140 character tweet. I don't even think it's 280. That's good. That's so. Yeah, it is interesting. It's going to be a question. I just think it is sort of too early to tell. But for me, I feel like the momentum, the way that the momentum it is, and here's the thing. Like, I was talking to Lishpa about this. I'm like, that when I started out doing this stuff, I was annoying a lot of people, and really there was nobody else out there. I saw Ayan Hirsi Ali was doing it, like she had books out, and there was Salman Rushdie, and the Mariam Namazi, and there were a few people out there who were doing it. It was a handful, but everybody was either in the closet or nobody really spoke out about it. Now there's so many people. I almost feel like, okay, I can kind of there's so many people, there's so many organizations, there's so many events, there's it's just so different. Like, it's a world of difference from what it
Right.
was 10 years ago. Like,
It
it's
is.
been
It
amazing.
is. But
And I'm not
when
just
we
talking
went,
about here in North America. I'm talking about
right,
like all of the people that I hear from
And
everywhere
it
else.
actually moved quickly, you guys. Because if you think about like growing up here in Canada, sexism and homophobia were accepted parts of society. It's in all the movies that we watched. Like just recently, I rewatched Mrs. Doubtfire with my daughter,
Oh, Robin.
and
Robin
there's
Williams.
total like a transphobic part in that movie that I didn't notice when I was a kid, right? Because it was so normal. And I mean, that's just one example. Like if you watch any of those old movies, you're like, oh my God, the rampant sexism and the rampant homophobia. It was normal. And to have gone from that to where we are in society today with, with marriage equality and everything else in my lifetime,
right,
that's huge. And it's maybe we felt like it was moving really slowly when it was happening, but to look back now, we can admit that that was actually a pretty quick turnaround. And I feel the same way about all of this. It actually is happening really quickly.
yeah, but change happens very quickly. But the thing is, when people are alive and they notice progress, they seem to think that, I'm not saying that this is what you're saying, but they seem to think progress is the norm. And when people are alive and things are going downwards, they seem to think everything getting shittier is the norm, right? So, but I understand that you guys are not looking at just your personal experience, you're looking at global trends and history as well. But I mean, there are the upward trends I'm hoping on average are, yes, like we are living in the best of times. Like I know that, but there are downward cycles that could go on for way too long. This
Yeah, I think he got.
disconnected.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if it comes back. Let's read some of the. I don't know why we're getting feel the burn kind of hashtags in the live chat. How did we get over? How did we get to? Oh, I think the lesser of two evil brought that up.
Nib-
Cool. I like how you silence Cope for a while, and now that
Yeah.
he's back, he's saying hi again.
Well, he's learned his lesson because he knows if he doesn't smarten up, that the next one is going to be a block. So,
Oh, where's
Yasmin,
what
don't play around.
Yeah. What happened? Where's Ellie? Internet went down. Waiting. Continue. We'll join a bit. So I don't know what.
Oh yeah, somebody was asking me about the book Letters to a Young Muslim. I mean, we keep on having the same conversation, but from different perspectives. But it's the same thing all over again. Letters to a Young Muslim. The guy who wrote it is still a Muslim, and I actually, in my head, I'm like, he's pretty much just a Majid Nawaz of the Arab world. So I'm happy. I'm happy with people that do not want to kill me. I'm happy that with people who do not want to kill others. If you're going to call yourself a Sufi, you're going to call yourself a reformer, you're going to call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. I don't care. As long as you're okay with human beings being able to live their lives happily and you not getting involved in their business, then I'm okay with that.
Can I tell you why I have a problem with that line of reasoning? It's because, of course, we don't have a problem. Oh, here Ellie is. I'm not gonna say anything.
Ryan, I don't understand your question, but how can they base their stance?
Ali, I'm gonna
repeat the question.
Ali, I'm gonna respond to something Yas just said. She said, like, as long as people don't want to kill me, I don't have a problem with it. Well,
no, I don't. You want to be a vegan? You want to be a Zoroastrian? You want to be a whatever you want to be? I don't care.
But yes, that's not my issue with reformers. My issue with reformers is not that, oh great, you can't kill me, but that's a pretty low standard to have, right? My issue with reformers is not, I mean, a lot of fundamentalist Muslims also will never kill me. Okay, I could get along with a lot of fundamentalist Muslims as well. That's not my issue with them. My issue with reformists is that they are not convincing anybody, and they're standing in, of course they're good people. Of course I get along with them better than somebody that thinks that I deserve to burn to it, whatever. Of course, that's not even a question. My issue with them is that they are telling already good people that would never want to hurt me that they have the right version of Islam. Okay, they are not making any changes. Not only they're not making any changes, they're also standing in the way of other people that are trying to change people, and they providing a fake cover. Here's the thing: the only way for Islam, how does enlightenment happen? Enlightenment happens with better ideas that competes with Islam, right? And what the reform movement does, it says, like, you don't need to compete with this idea because it's not as bad as you think. It provides a fake cover for the shitty idea that Islam is. And that's why I'm not saying that's their intention, but they are in our fucking way. It's not just that. Wait, let me finish this. It's not just that they're not helping, they're actually hurting.
Well, I'm not going to agree with that. I'm not going to agree with any religious people want to practice their faith. They can go ahead and do that. I don't care what the faith is.
That's not Armin, can I say something?
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying they're standing in our way. Theoretically, all people of faith are standing in our way.
No,
but that's not my way. My way isn't with.
No, not all people.
Armin, you skipped one step. One step before the whole ex-Muslim thing, and people can listen to us, is a space where we can speak where they can speak and we can have not reform but the
And guess
fundamentalist
who's
Muslims.
giving us that space?
Hold,
Muslim, yeah.
No. When it comes to giving the space, that's where the reform people also come in. So here,
Nope.
listen. You're talking about theoretical. What you're saying is that it's a very, very cerebral thing. But
I'm not talking about.
hold on. Here's a practicality. Okay, I have a whole bunch of friends, and I told Majid this when he was on the podcast too. Like my sister and a lot of her friends, they do not want to leave the religion at all. So they really like the stuff he says. The stuff that he says about scripture and everything.
Who are you talking about? No, who are you talking about?
About Majid. Okay, so I'm
No, no.
using him as
You say you're who?
my sister, a lot of her friends, a lot of my friends from med
All right,
school and
all right,
everything who
all
grew
right.
up in Pakistan who have families and stuff. They don't want to
Yes,
leave
yes,
their.
yes.
They don't. They
Okay,
don't
that's a
want
good
to.
example. Go on, go on.
They don't want to leave the religion. They don't want to. I know he's got something cooking right now.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to
yeah.
leave the religion. They don't want to leave the traditions and all that, the way
Right,
that they
right,
live.
right,
But they also want to modernize. So what they do is they're like, okay, Ali, you're a little bit too extreme. If we start saying that, we're going to go to war with all our families.
right, right,
But
right, right.
this kind of thing, this reform thing, I can put my foot here. Now, once they put their foot there, they
It's a slippery
listen.
slope.
It's not.
No. Once they put their
Mm,
foot in there, they listen to me.
no.
Mm.
Suddenly, they're reading my stuff and they're interested in what I have to say
No.
because now they've moved from that to a sort of
All right.
a middle space where they're
They've
open
opened their
to those
mind.
ideas.
Yeah.
You're talking.
That
Are you?
that
You're
is the
talking about
contribution.
people that were already never harmful to anybody. Okay.
Right,
First of all.
I
Second of
don't like
all.
calling it
Yeah.
I don't like calling it reformation, obvious for obvious reasons. I don't even like necessarily calling it reform. I had to use those terms because that's what everybody uses.
Right.
But that place, that room that people can step into, some people, not everybody. There's some people who are completely convinced by us. I agree with you.
Right.
But for the people that aren't, who are very, very grounded in the community aspect of the religion, once they step into this room, they listen to people like you and me.
No. Actually,
They're
that's not
open
what
to it.
happens. They are good people.
I'm telling you, it
These are,
happens. Like
yeah,
this is
okay,
what
but
I'm
this is
telling you.
what I tell you. Yeah, this is your personal experience. But what I tell you, what the major experience, I might be completely off my numbers, okay? But what happens mostly is like, okay, Islam, these people are crazy. I'm not that. Reform Islam, that's me. I don't need to listen to anything anymore, right? It's usually it's not a conversation starter. It's a conversation ender. You know, I'm comfortable. Reform Islam is for
There
good
are people like
Muslims
that
to.
too.
No, let me tell you.
Okay, go. Go on.
First of all, I just want to point out when we say we want people to be able to practice whatever they want to believe in as long as they heard it. Of course. Neither. I think both reformers and ex-Muslim advocates are not in a position to say that we want to force people. We're not okay with people believing what they want. Of course, we're both inviting. We're
That's not a
both in.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, we're both inviting them to consider our arguments. Nobody is saying that you should become an ex-Muslim or you should become a reform Muslim, right? We're both inviting people. But what I'm saying is that when when you when you see the bullshit that is Islam and you say, okay, reform Islam or whatever. First of all, most Muslims would never participate in either ex-Muslim or reform conversation. They're already good people, and Islam is not even a major part of their life. They're Muslim. They might pray, they might fast, but most of 90% of their brain is occupied with more important issues like their career or their whatever, their kids or other stuff, right? So this is not even part. So they're just good people and they're just Muslim, right? That's just not a big part of their life. The people that do take this seriously and they're uncomfortable about what Islam represents, saying that okay, this might not actually mean what I think it means. It's a comfortable position to be, right? These are people that were already good people, were already never going to do anything to anybody. They're just uncomfortable with what these verses seem to mean. And as soon as somebody says something that might kind of suggest to them that okay, it might mean something else. Okay, now I don't need to think about it anymore because somebody that seems to know that what they're
And
talking
why
about
is
is
that a
telling me.
problem with why are you not okay with that?
But who are these people changing? The reform movement is not changing the people that we need changing. These are people, you know what, and you know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
I do understand what you're
but
saying,
it
but
is.
who
It is
cares? There's
changing.
more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah,
No,
there's.
So
it,
if
no,
you're a
no, not
Salafi and you become an
okay.
atheist,
It's
or
one.
if you're a liberal Muslim and you become a reformer, who cares? It's all
It's
moving in the right
okay.
direction.
It's more than one way to skin a cat, but we only have 5 cat skinners, and we only have 2 knives to go around, right?
very
So,
cerebral.
and we have
Cerebral.
50 cats that we need to skin, and we only have very limited amount of time.
I'll tell you
okay?
what, Armin. I'll
So
tell you
we
what.
need to find out the best method to skin a cat, not
There's no
just
such thing as the best method.
all
Because
the
every
methods to skin
individual
cats.
has a different
Well, we need to
experience in their
try.
life.
We need to try to find the best way.
It's not going
I
to work
think
on my
that
sister and her friends.
there's never going to be one universal best way. Everybody's going to do what's best for them and their own personal situation.
Sorry,
Now, I am an atheist and I have been for a very long time.
Can you repeat?
Mhm.
I said there's
Can you
no
repeat that? You got cut for a second.
I said I don't think that there's ever going to be one universal best way for everybody. I think that every individual is going to choose the path that fits their life the best. So, honestly, now after 15 years or longer of not having any contact with anybody in my family, there are times of when I'm feeling really down and lonely and tired. I feel like, you know what? If reform, if that had been available for me, if I knew that that was even an option, and I could have just bullshitted my family and said, "Yeah, I'm still a Muslim, but I'm just like I'm a reform Muslim now," and then they still would have communicated with me and not wanted to kill me, then I probably would have taken that option because then at least my kids would have a grandmother and a
Well, there's,
grandfather. Do you know what I mean?
of
So
course,
even
bullshitting reform.
though objectively I agree with you and I understand obviously the truth is better and I advocate for truth as opposed to advocating for reform, I don't think that we can universally say this one is better than that one. I mean, it is better in that one is truth and one is not truth, but everybody's going to do what they need to do for their own
Yeah,
life.
and Armin, I also think that your
First of-
definition of reform is really narrow. Like when you're talking about
No, let me respond to that. I can't respond to
Okay.
so many things at the same time, right? First of all, here's a shocker. I could be completely fucking wrong about all of this, right? Right? I could not only reform could be a good way, it could be the best way to address all of this. But you know, here's another thing. I think
That's the end of the podcast, guys. Thank you. Go ahead.
but another thing is that because I don't think that I'm gonna completely because I think it's not the most effective way. I'm going to push. I'm not saying it's not going to have results. Of course, how could it not have results? Anything you try, at least you're going to have anecdotal results. But the reason why I'm going to push for the best method is because whatever time and resources we have, which is very limited, we don't get the audience that we need. We don't get the attention that we need. Any amount of audience that you get, any amount of resources that you get, has to be spent on the best method. And guess what? I could be wrong.
We agree with that.
Let me finish it. Let me
You
finish
talk
it.
to us as if we're reformers. You realize
I'm not. I'm arguing against like we should try everything idea.
I'm not saying we should try everything. I'm saying let other people try whatever they want to try. I don't care.
How are we stopping them if I argue against them?
Then we agree.
Then why are we talking about this?
No. You guys are saying let reformers do their things. At one point, did we go and put it? No. Here's the thing. Not only I want to let reformers do what they're doing, I want to let Muslims do what they're doing too. I want the Muslims preach Islam as well. Okay, so
but you were the one that was saying reformers are standing in our fucking way.
Yes, they are, but I'm not stopping them. Things. If I'm advocating against the reform and saying people should focus on the ex-Muslim movement, that's not letting them do this thing. This is me inviting people to consider the ex-Muslim movement over the reform movement. But to say I'm not letting the reform movements do this thing. How am I not letting them?
Okay, then I
How
think
is-
we're all in agreement
Yeah, we all
then.
agree. I also think that again, I was going to get to the term reform, and different people define it in different ways. There's an aspect of reform that's about scriptural reinterpretation, which I think all of us think is bullshit, and I
Yeah.
actually don't think it's very convincing either. I don't.
No.
But there is also a broader term of the reform, which includes the
Basically means cherry picking.
bring everybody in, bring the ex-Muslims in, don't punish the apostates. Here, hug the apostates, have a dialogue with them, question your beliefs. That kind of reform is completely consistent with all of us. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of young Muslims want to do, and they're not going to do it if it comes under the umbrella of apostasy. They are going to do it when it comes under the umbrella of reform, and that makes them more tuned to what we're saying. It allows them to listen to us, and that's why, like, I actually support the whole reform thing, even though I also think it's not that convincing. To me, it's not convincing.
Okay. So when you say support, there's one thing to support a movement, and there's another thing is there's support the right for them to have a movement. Those are completely different things.
No,
I
I'm
don't
talking about supporting the movement. The
no.
definition that I talked about of
Oh yes,
reform,
okay,
of
right.
bringing everybody in, the umbrella
Okay,
reform,
that's a different.
bringing,
Okay, but what you're
yes,
saying, I support that as well, but that's a completely different thing that we're talking about when we're talking about
that's
reforming Islam.
Majid's definition of
No,
reform.
no, they're talking about reforming Islam. By reforming Islam, they meaning what they're saying is they keep dancing around what they mean as well. By the way, they
No, no,
everything,
they
but,
include
but,
that.
but
That's a
yeah,
part of it that
but
we disagree with.
the part of the reform that I think is fucking bullshit is the fact that you could take a book that says like, here's beat your wife, here's how you have slaves, here's how you
I
torture people that no, let me finish, let me
completely
finish.
agree.
If you
Yeah.
take a book and like, hey, let's reform this, I like, here's a better idea, let's throw that fucking book in the garbage can and move on from that book. Like, I don't want, if I is for me is as ridiculous as somebody saying, "Hey, let's reform Nazism. Let's reform the Mein Kampf and try to look at it in a different way." Well, let's fucking not.
Yeah. That's a part of it. That is just that's a part of it
That's the
that I
part of
disagree
it that
with
I
too.
don't agree.
Like, let's
Of
take the
course, I agree.
Quilliam thing.
Of course, the other part. If you say like, "Oh, let's talk more. Let's be more inclusive. Let's have secularism." Of course, I'm going to support that. What the fuck? Of course, the
That's all I'm
part of
saying.
the reform, the part of the reform movement that I can never get behind is any suggestion that 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 hate book that is the Quran could at any point be a force for good. Anybody that suggests that, or anybody that suggests that Muhammad could ever be a role model for anything other than evil is basically fucking kidding themselves. Okay, you have to admit that whatever, I don't know what the real Muhammad was like, but this fucking character of Muhammad that we have could never be a guide to life in the modern world. Anybody that suggests that maybe we could look at it and twist it a little bit like this and that, and maybe it could be like, fucking get rid of, what the fuck are you
So we all
hanging on
agree.
to this?
We all
Like,
agree on that. But I
I
think
know,
that
but that's a part of the reform that I could never get behind. I will never support that. Anybody that suggests that the Quran has any place in the modern world today as a guideline, I will never support that. Not only I would never support that, I will fight that. That's what I would do.
We know.
okay, yeah. I thought your mic
But
was
that's the reform movement. That's the reform movement. That's why I'm not
so,
support that.
con-
You say Ali is saying I'm support that. I would say I would never support it. But
okay.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
so the basically we're all in favor of the Enlightenment. We take Enlightenment over reform. Give us the Voltaire. Don't give us a
Right.
Martin Luther.
Right.
Okay, or the Calvin Klein. No, not Calvin Klein. The Calvin. Fuck it. The other Calvin. The Reformed Calvin. Anyway, yeah. So that's what we want as far as reform goes. When it comes to the umbrella reform, the idea that everybody in the Muslim world, the thing that's needed is more open dialogue without stigmas of apostasy, stigmas of blasphemy, all that. And we need to bring in all the voices and be inclusive and have a dialogue without anybody having to worry about death, freedom of and from religion. If that is the definition of reform that we're talking about, then we are all fully in
Well,
support of it.
okay,
When it comes to
I'll
scriptural
support Ali's
interpretation,
version of reform. How about that?
that's
Yeah,
actually Majid's definition too. However, there
No,
are
it's
people that
no.
like
No, it's not. I mean, that's what they say. That's sometimes what they would say. But part of
They
the
say both.
reform
They
is
say
still
both.
leave room for the Quran, and they
Interpretation.
leave
Right,
room
right,
for
right, right.
Muhammad. I'm
I know,
like, fuck both of those things.
I know, all of that. They have a part of that do it. That part of it I don't agree with. The overall idea of it, I'm down with. So that's kind of where I am. Anyway, that was
Right.
good. That was interesting. We covered a lot of ground. And let's
Sorry,
we're gonna
guys.
keep on coming back
Did I
at
get
you
too
with
aggressive on you guys? I
oh
know you
no.
guys agree with me.
No, it's
No,
fine.
wasn't-
it's good.
We just, I think we all would like to see, obviously, all fairy tales eradicated and all people be rational human beings. But barring that wonderful, never going to happen utopia, then we're at least going to be happy with Islam being to the point where Christianity is now. So separation of mosque and state.
which is
And if-
submitted and humiliated. That's what we want.
Exactly. That's what we want. That's what we're hoping for. Powerless. And if you have a child that says, I don't want to be a Muslim anymore, then it's not a big deal, just like it's not a big deal in most Christian households.
That would
Not
be
all,
nice.
of course.
So, I think that there are the seeds of that sort of beginning. We're kind of seeing it happen to some extent. There's still a lot of work to do,
Mhm.
and but I think there's
Another in the live chat is saying that my own family disowned me for leaving Islam. Sorry to
Yeah,
hear that.
that's what we don't, that's exactly what's one of the many, many things that's wrong with this religion. But now that I know how you feel. But
Anyway.
that's what we're trying to fight against.
And we have more guests lined up in the future. We're going to come in people from all kinds of different countries who grew up in Muslim backgrounds of all kinds of severity, and you're going to hear more of their stories, just like you have on this podcast before. So
By the way,
do check out, if you're new to this, do go through the older episodes and listen to some of the older interviews we've done with people who have escaped Islam, and some of them are in Western countries. Some of them actually spoke to us from Muslim majority countries, and a lot of the interviews are really riveting. So do check it out.
I love our guests, but just talking to you guys is my favorite part of this podcast.
You mean yelling at us?
Sorry, guests.
Hey.
Sorry, guests.
Nick, were you a Muslim? You said he said his uncle died last week and he wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. I wonder if that's. Oh yeah, it's Nick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if it's the same
that
Nick.
happens, man. It's terrible. Like these stories they're still around, but now I guess more people are speaking out. More people are actually coming out of the closet. They're showing their faces. They're putting names to their faces.
Yeah. I mean, compared to last year, here's a point of optimism to end it on. Even compared to last year, I'm noticing so many people online saying that they left Islam and they're ex-Muslim. Like even compared to last year, the numbers have increased so
I'll
much.
tell you, I meet Muslim people. Like I still interact with a lot of Muslim people, and I meet young Muslims, like especially the millennials. Most of them are actually completely open to the idea that the Quran is not infallible. That was
even that is huge. That was unheard of.
If I went to a family party, just a family party 10 years ago, I would never see that suggestion.
I mean, you know what, you guys, in the past year that we just started this podcast, I remember like in one of our very first episodes, we talked about how we knew a handful of Muslims. I knew 2 Muslims that accepted the fact that the Quran could have errors in it, that it wasn't infallible. And now, like you're saying, it's like almost like you can say it. You can say it and not be killed for it.
And here's what's something great that's happening. And on December 9th, and this is a plug, we had Noura and Bobby on on a previous podcast episode. She's a president of Muslimish. They're holding their next conference, the winter conference, on December 9th in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the largest Muslim population in the United States.
Hope they have good security.
Yeah, they're going to arrange
By the way,
for
guys,
I'm speaking there, Noura's speaking there. So it's
and
going
Armin,
to be...
you're speaking tomorrow, right?
Yes, and yesterday, guys, so many people have such good security.
And Rushdie speak. There was like the walls were covered with security guards.
Yeah, you have to have that. It's unfortunate, but it is kind of cool.
It's
By the
such a sad state of affairs,
I know, it's really
honestly.
sad.
Guys, also, can I let you guys know about the Atheist Republic voicemails, which I really want you guys to, if you get a chance to go leave a voicemail as well and listen to some of it, because these are just people just from everywhere around the world. They're leaving voicemails. Half of them are ex-Muslims, and they're just leaving, talking about their situation. And so one guy was actually leaving a voicemail as he was running away from his family, and like, I told them they're about to kill me. I'm getting in my car. I just wanted to let you guys know. Wish me luck. And he was just leaving a voicemail on
Armin,
his way.
Armin, why don't we do an episode where you choose like maybe 5 or 10 of those, and then
Oh,
we play them and we talk about it.
oh,
Just
okay.
that'll be like a really really nice sort of organic example of it. It'll show the audience what
What people
what
are
is
going
I
through
could
really
pick.
across the
I could
world.
pick the ex-Muslim ones only because it would be
Yeah.
relative to relevant to
Yeah,
this.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
Mhm.
anything that's relevant, even if it's not, we'll focus on the ex-Muslims, but even if it's other ones. But anyway, this is another
but
conversation. I
but
gotta
but anybody that is listening, I just want to say this: if you guys want to be a host, like, you could just go on atheistrepublic.com and you could just record your voicemails there, and it will be on the Atheist Republic voicemail podcast. It's basically a podcast with no hosts, just the people that leave the voicemail are the hosts, and it's just going to be voicemail after voicemail after voicemail. So if anybody is interested, just go leave your opinion or just go listen to other people's opinions from everywhere around. We're just basically democratizing podcasting, so everybody gets to have a voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Very
Amazing.
cool.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Secular Jihadists from the Middle East. If you like what you heard, please go and support us. It's
Yes.
patreon.com/SJME and give just $1 or more. It's a lot of bang
Yeah.
for your buck. No,
Yeah.
not literally.
We had Ubaid Beach. He was like our second guest. We love him.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And
And
whoever is already donating, thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really
Yeah.
need your support. So thank you so much for supporting it. You're making it available for everybody else that can't, can't help, but we giving free content, and basically we're putting our time and resources to this, and you're making it possible for this podcast to go to everybody else that is listening to it and taking advantage of your
Yeah.
donation. So thank you for
and,
that.
and if you guys, if any of you out there think we're complete assholes and what we do pisses you off, and please go out and tweet about it. Talk about how bad, because that just really helps us. Yeah.
Or come as a guest on our show. Let us know. Or something.
Basket of triggerables.
No, comment, and tell us, and we might actually address your
Comment on Armin or on Ali's page. Stay away from mine, please.
No, on the YouTube.
Because
And
I'm gonna block your ass.
go on YouTube and find the video for this episode and comment on it. And I'll promise we'll go read it, and we'll try to address as many of them as we possibly can.
Inshallah.
All right. Good
All
night,
right,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye.
you guys.